What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. We got a surprise Tuesday drop. Usually we do War Room, then Pod. There's too much to react to. So we're doing the midday Tuesday drop. War Room will hit tomorrow morning, where we answer all of your Discord questions. We're about, 6-7 practices in, a couple padded practices. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling? Fresh off the road tour for college football. Where's your head at?
I'm good. I was a little sleepy after Big Ten media days. It's a sprint. It's in Indy, so it has that combine feel. But college football did over 20 interviews, coaches and players across 3 days, which is great. It just gets me a head start on this entire process. It's interesting talking to college coaches and seeing how some of them differ from NFL coaches, how some of them have had NFL experience. So it's good to ask them about some things that cross over between both the college and pro game. But football is football, and it's nice when you get back from a trip like that and the tweets are flying about training camp practices already. For better or for worse, there's going to be a lot of good out of camp in the beginning. There's going to be a lot of bad and struggles out of camp in the beginning. Reminder that these are practices. So I was excited to jump on with you, Joe, and do this podcast and get it out as quick as we could, because it feels like for the first time in maybe 2 months, we have legitimate conversations going on. And this is the time of year where you're trying to decipher what matters and what doesn't. And I think there's a lot of combos around the Jets that are really important right now. And then, of course, as always, there's some combos around the Jets that are just a little bit overblown.
Well, let's start with what has become a story over the past 2 days after what I would say, for the offense at least, was basically a perfect start to camp. All very positive, all exciting, all Aaron Rodgers touchdowns and domination. Last 2 days, it's been a little more choppy for the offense. Not a disaster, but not as consistent as the early days. The biggest headline problem now seems to be that Joe Tippmann has the yips a little bit, and he's snapping the ball high and over Rodgers' head consistently. It's been a 2-day problem now. There was little signs of this last year, not to the extent of a Spencer Long situation.
Right.
But at this point, it definitely feels like something to keep an eye on. You're already getting some of the panic tweets calling for Connor McGovern, which I think is a little dramatic. Is there been anything in Tippmann's history that has indicated that this could be an issue? And, it's July. It's not even August yet. He's going to get a ton more reps the next 6 weeks. How concerning is this? Or is this just going to be a couple-day thing that he shakes himself out of?
It's definitely a talking point, right? Like, I think this is a worthy conversation. Now, I think there's a couple things to unpack here. One, the good news is, and I know we're really tiptoeing the line, we're close here, but it's not even August yet. So you want these issues to present themselves now rather than, if this showed up, if he was fine throughout the first couple weeks of practice and then the preseason games, this is a game speed issue, then you're looking around and going, man, we don't want to find out the hard way during week 1 of the NFL season. So I don't remember this being an issue with him as a prospect, which is kind of interesting. I have, obviously I've watched a ton of tape with the Jets, but I have seen it floating around on Twitter as well that, like, there was moments last year, don't get me wrong. And I always found it interesting how it felt I'm not saying definitively, but it felt like he was very, or leaned strongly about a veteran center, notably McGovern being the guy out of the gate last year. Because the Jets used an early second rounder on Tippmann, we were looking around and just kind of thinking plug and play. And then when they got into the summer last year, it was just a little bit, especially McGovern came back for near the vet minimum. Yeah. And they almost weren't even really giving Tippmann that crazy of a look out of the gate last year. And that's a little surprising at times for where they picked him. And then things kind of sorted themselves throughout the season. And I thought he had big flashes of both guard and center. Now you go into this year where he's kind of written almost in pen as the starting center. And these issues come up. Obviously, Rodgers was very upset throughout some of that, notably the first practice where Tippmann's snapping issues came up. I know on the Tuesday practice, there was at least one bad snap. I look at it like this, Joe. I think that sometimes it's play speed where, because we didn't hear a peep about this in OTAs, by the way. That's what I want to draw out. So now you're in full pads. The bullets are flying. Guys are hitting, as we've seen. Guys are jumping off the ball and getting after the quarterback. I mean, it could be a situation where he is trying to do three things at once, and it is the classic you got to walk before you sprint situation. Like, you got to snap the ball. Now, the flip side of that is concerning, because that is not a complex aspect, I think, of playing this position. Like, there are a lot of things that are really difficult about playing center. Snapping the ball kind of feels like the first building block of playing that position. So it's not going to be surprised. And Rodgers he's going to be hard on everybody. But Tippmann is, arguably the most important player in front of Rodgers right now with that quarterback center connection. He's going into year two. Expectations are raised where they got to figure this out. And I don't think it's going to be a quick hook. I don't think if this goes on sporadically over the next 5-6 practices that they just throw a Schweitzer in there and let Tippmann be like a backup guard. That seems crazy to me, because
seems extreme.
That seems extreme. Tippmann's he's one of their best five. There's no way around it, right? I mean, he's one of their best five. He needs to be out there. They planned for him to be the center, right? You went out and signed a guard. You moved ABT to guard, and you added 3 tackles. They never, ever made a move. They didn't even go get a different backup center. They just said, Schweitzer's getting healthy. We like him. This was always one of the most steady, probably the most steady aspect of the Jets' offensive line plan. I mean, because even once again, they moved ABT back in. They signed a guard. They added 3 tackles, premium tackles. So I think they are not going to overreact to this. But if we are still having this same exact conversation in 2 weeks, not only are we going to be sweating it a little bit, damn well a veteran quarterback that thinks he has 2 years left in the league is not going to they're not going to want to play with a powder keg situation like that. So this is one that everybody's going to be watching closely now.
I want to say that the preseason is going to be a great opportunity to smooth this out, hopefully, because the problem started when the pads went on. It goes up that higher of a level in the preseason game. They'll have the scrimmage this Saturday, which is like a step towards a game setting. But we just got a quote in real time from Saleh. Doesn't really expect Rodgers to play at all in the preseason. Definitely not going to play in the first 2 preseason games.
And why would you, right?
Yeah. But so Tippmann's going to get reps, but they're not going to be with Rodgers. So Rodgers is probably still going to have that concern, even if Tippmann is smooth with Tyrod Taylor and Peasley and whatever other quarterback they're rotating through.
Adrian Martinez now?
Yeah, Adrian Martinez. We had Ben Bryant for 4 hours. It will be something that we'll have eyes on, and I do hope it does not lead to some type of panic pivot to Schweitzer or McGovern, who's still unsigned for a reason, because from a pure talent perspective, if Tippmann could get this under control, unquestionably, he's one of their best 5, and you want him out there. So the green and white scrimmage are going to be an important one. Higher pressure, higher stakes, and hopefully it just smooths out, because if the snap's not right, the timing's off for the whole play, and you're behind on everything. The rest of the offense, not a great day yesterday. That's going to happen. They're not going to be perfect every single day. The Jets have one of the 5 best defenses in football. They're going to win some days. They better win some days.
Yeah, it's concerning if they don't.
Yeah. Today, a little smoother, and they're working still with this sort of grab bag at receiver. And I feel like there hasn't been a lot of Conklin, Ruckert, Yeboah, Kuntz. I feel like they're intentionally funneling a ton through the receivers, because they need to figure out who's taking these reps and targets, because it does not seem like Mike Williams is going to play at all until week 1. And it's even up in the air if he's going to play week 1. So you're seeing a lot of Alan Lazard, a lot of Malik Taylor, like an alarming amount of Malik Taylor. Corley starting to get some reps now. Had a nice one-handed grab with Rodgers today. Gibson's banged up a little bit, so that's opening up more reps. Been quiet for our guy Brownlee so far. They got to get these guys targets, reps, and get them comfortable. I'm glad that finally today Corley made a play with the ones, because if Gibson's going to be out or banged up at all, he has to get into the mix. It's nice that Lazard's playing better, but there's a ceiling to what he can do. He's a very limited receiver in certain ways. Now, can he settle in for a couple weeks to being a complimentary player who could get open in the zone, can catch the ball and get down, can block a little bit? Yes. There's just some real limitations there. So I was also encouraged today when we heard the Breece Hall wheel route. Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis getting a lot of reps in the passing game and in pass pro, because once you get past Garrett Wilson, who's going to get 500 targets this year, it's going to be very interesting to see how all this is distributed. But man, I'm happy with everything we've seen through camp outside of the Reddick situation, which we'll talk about. that receiver depth chart, especially when Gibson is out, it's terrifying. And Gibson's like an okay young player. He should probably be like your fourth receiver. But now we're talking, it's like Garrett Wilson, Lazard, Malik Taylor, and then it's like Brownlee and Corley. And it's like, man, that is like scary, scary thin. So what are your thoughts on the summer of Allen, as it's been dubbed so far, and this receiver room that now at least seems to be starting to be comfortable with Corley playing a bit more? How you feeling about that position?
It's interesting because I think it's been better than we expected through the first week because Lazard's alive. And
Yes.
basically, how I look at it is if Lazard was doing this, if they had just signed Lazard and and he's dropped a few, right? But he's also made some big plays. You'd be like, okay, this is what we expected. But we have such PTSD from Lazard being a zero last year. I'm already starting to lean into and this is not a good excuse, by the way, but it's, it is what it is. I think this guy totally checked out last year when Rodgers got hurt. Totally checked out, which there's part of you that goes, man, like when you play in the NFL, you have to have different DNA, obviously. Checking out on any kind of season is, especially when your defense just needed you to do anything, that's not ideal. But the glass half full is if Rodgers gets anything out of Lazard, a guy that our conversations about Lazard this spring were he might not make the roster, it feels like a small victory, which sounds crazy. My thoughts on Lazard is I don't need Lazard to catch 60 passes, 800 yards, 7 touchdowns this year. I'm not even like entertaining the idea of that possibility. I need Lazard to be a mediocre number 3-ish wide receiver for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. That is what I need from Allen Lazard.
The bare minimum, just be
which is
kind of
lowest
mediocre.
Bar. With Aaron Rodgers, that is the lowest bar. I truly think Jason Brownlee can give you that if you just threw him off the cliff and said, "Listen, you're in the lion's den now, like sink or swim." I think he could do it. It might not be pretty at times, but it's the same could be said about Lazard. So now I think Rodgers. What I love about some of the camp videos, and it's so funny how practice videos are interpreted these days. When guys are having animated conversations, everybody's like, "Oh my God, what is going on?" It's almost like nobody remembers what practicing is like. You fight with teammates all the time. You have animated conversations with coaches. It's emotional. It's hot. You're just trying to get off the ground. I think it's great that Rodgers, it's no different too. He's having those conversations with Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson wants to be great. He could have those conversations with Breece Hall. I think the only guy that he probably would kind of dial it down to like a 2 out of 10 is Tyron Smith because Tyron Smith has done this for 10 plus years, and you know what you're getting out there every single time. That it's a little different. But Rodgers challenges everybody to be great. And I think that Lazard internally probably feels almost afraid to let Rodgers down with their history. That, once again, I don't need Lazard to have games where he catches 7 passes for 100 yards and a touchdown. I need Lazard to maybe get you 2 first down conversions and block his ass off and be a presence in the red zone for a couple weeks. And Mike Williams is here. So I think the wide receiver room right now, we're all going to sit here and say it's not great, but this goes back to the original conversation we've had over the last couple of weeks about coaching. Why can't the Jets live in a world where you're a little creative and, Garrett Wilson's the number 1. Tyler Conklin's going to be a big part of this passing offense out of the gate. But if Braylon Allen looks the way he has for the next 5 weeks, I mean, you're telling me there's not a package where you're in shotgun, you have both Breece and Allen in the backfield, and you can't motion Breece out into the slot, and then you have the quarterback has the option to hand the ball off to Allen or throw the quick game to Breece. This is what that's you do. Exciting. Right, that's exciting. This is what you, and it also it forces teams, this is the entire goal of coaching offense in the NFL, to not be able to play really heavy or really light. They have to respect the balance. Braylon Allen is a north-south, downhill MFer of a runner that runs through people. So if you have Breece and Allen on the field, I'm not saying do this 90% of the game, but you have a look where they're both on the field, and then a linebacker has to trail out with Breece into the slot. He's not going to cover Breece, but if you have a situation, and if that linebacker trails like goes out to the slot, you should probably hand the ball off to Allen. If you have a corner on Brees and they're keeping things a little bit like a slot corner, keep things a little heavy in the box, it might open things up for Garrett Wilson. So these are and that's one example of a million. These are the things that the Jets need to figure out over the next 5 weeks is what is September going to look like? Because I think October and November are going to look a lot different for the Jets when the reinforcements are there and things are up to speed. But I think they're going to have to play a little bit of an ugly brand of football at times in September. And honestly, after San Francisco, I think the schedule affords you that opportunity anyway.